Now I want to spend some time reviewing the code that was generated for us. Consider this a guided tour of the Ionic-React code that the app wizard just gave us. Back in my terminal, there's a couple of commands that I'm going to enter now that you might want to make note of. The first one opens Visual Studio Code in the current directory, and I'll do that with code dot being the current directory. And the next one is an option to Ionic serve that does not cause the browser to be opened automatically, and that's the -B switch. So while that's getting set up and running, let's go ahead and look at some of the code that was generated for us. First stop is going to be the Ionic config JSON file. There's not much in here. We have the name of the application, an empty object of integrations, and integrations is like Cordova or capacitor. And you can see the type is React. Next up, let's look at the index.tsx file. This is the programmatic entry point of the application. You can see that we import React DOM. And what React DOM is a high-level library that provides methods for the HTML document object model. And this gets called from the topmost level of the application. The only thing we're doing with it is calling the render function. The render function takes two parameters. It takes an object to be rendered. In this case, it's the app tag, the app component. The second parameter is an element in the page whose ID is root. So here we're just passing a normal JavaScript getElementById function. So now where is that root element defined? That's over here in public in index.html. At the top inside of the head tag, there's a lot of meta tags in there that the Ionic team has spent a lot of time getting right. I don't recommend you ever mess with them. So down here in the body, here's the important piece. Here's the ID root that we were looking for. It's the only thing in the body. So if you think back a moment, we're going to get that div element and replace it with the app component. Now you're probably asking, where's the app component? The app component is in app.tsx. App.tsx is importing a lot of things. We'll skip all the imports and just scroll down to where the component itself is defined. And this is where the application really starts. App is defined as a constant arrow function of the type react.fc. So what is all that about? FC is short for function component. Basically, this is a function that will return some HTML. Let's walk through this file and this function to see what it means. The first thing we see is a call to the useState function. This is a hook. If you've heard about React hooks being all the rage, this is what they are. useState enables you to add state, surprise, surprise, to the otherwise stateless function components. It takes the default state as its parameter. In this case, we're passing an empty string. It returns an array containing two elements. The first element is the object containing our state. In this case, it's the currently selected page defaulting to an empty string. The second element of the array is a function we can use from inside the component to alter the state. When using hooks to manage your state, it is advised never change the state variable directly. So as you look through this code, you won't see any assignments to the selected page variable. Consider it read-only, even though it's technically not. So what's being returned by this function? And for this, I want to overlay the code on top of the browser so we can see what is being rendered with each piece. Well, first we have an Ion app. Ion app is the root Ionic component all applications must use. Inside of that, we have an Ion React router. This is Ionic's thin wrapper around the standard React router. The React router is what lets you create multi-paged applications with rich page transitions in what is really a single-page application. Inside of the Ion React router, we have an Ion split pane. I think in the last video clip, I referred to it as Ion split view. Technical name of the component is Ion split pane. This is the layout that gives you that sidebar menu that collapses automatically. Now inside of the split pane itself, we have that menu. And you can see the menu has an attribute called selected page, and we're setting it to the value of our selected page state variable. As an immediate sibling to the menu component, we have an Ion router outlet. So this is where your page content appears. The menu is off to the left, and the Ion router outlet contains the rest of your application or your content. And just inside of that, we define some routes. Think of a route as a URL. So given a path that starts with /page, followed by another identifier, and the colon means we're going to call that identifier name, whatever is really there. So it could be inbox, page/outbox, trash, etc. We're also passing to route a render function. And a render function simply means, what do we want to happen when this route is matched and tries to render? So that is also an arrow function. It takes a set of properties. Inside of that function, we call setSelectedPage. Remember, we don't want to set the selected page directly by writing to the variable, so we call the state function that was returned to us. So we set selected page to the URL parameter, which was passed in through props, that second part of the route, which is called name. And then what we do is we return a page object, or the page component, passing in whatever properties were given to us using that spread operator. So what that means is whatever properties were passed to our route, we're going to pass through and render that page component with those same properties. And then finally, exact equals true simply means that we only match this route if it's really /page/ some other word. This will make more sense as we start to modify these things. Finally, we have a route called /. So this is the default route. If nothing else is entered, we're simply going to render a redirect to /page/inbox. So what exactly is a page? As you might guess, it's another component. Let's take a look at the page.tsx file. It consists of a function component that returns a bunch of Ionic markup. The primary difference here is that the function component is a generic of type route component props, which is itself a generic. Those are those angle brackets if you're not familiar with that particular style. This is what lets the router pass those route parameters. In this case, it's expecting that route props to contain just a name, which it passes into the arrow function as the value match. Looking down a bit, almost hidden in that jungle of Ionic components is an Explorer container. I'm going to right-click on it and choose Go to Definition. And I'll select this one and double-click. I could have also pressed F12 on my keyboard. The Explorer container is another custom function component which also accepts some container props. This one is much simpler, though, in that it only contains some simple HTML, with only a single variable expansion inside of that strong tag. Finally, let's take a look at the menu. Near the top, the menu defines an app page interface used to hold some common properties about a page, such as its URL, icons, and title. Below that is an array of pages. So now you see where they come from. Next, we have those list of labels that we can see in the menu. And just below that is the markup. The menu itself is built with an ion list, a component designed to format items in, well, you guessed it, a list. The ion note provides what appears to be a header. Then we come to some interesting code. The array map function is called on the app pages array to transform it into a series of ion menu toggle components, which are used to toggle a menu open or closed. Inside of the ion menu toggle is an ion item, which is another ion component which is used to group other components together. In this case, an ion icon and an ion label, both of which should be pretty self-explanatory. The ion item has a router link attribute set to the value of the current page's URL. This tells Ionic's router to switch to that page when clicked. One other thing I want to point out on the ion item is an attribute called class name. That is set to the value of some code that gets executed. So remember selected page from app.tsx? Well, this is what we do with it. What this code is saying is if selected page is equal to the page title, then we're going to set class name to the word selected. Otherwise, we're going to set it to an empty string. And that class is what's responsible for highlighting the menu items. Below the menu is another list generated the same way as the menu. The difference is it uses the labels array and contains no router links. Now, before we wrap up completely, I want to do a couple of fun things, which we'll do in the next video.